Hello and welcome to the editorial analysis of The Hindu. Today we shall be discussing the editorial of the 15th of April. So coming to the first article, Necessary Steps to Ending Poverty. A very important article. This is one of the most hot topics for this year. It is a debate whether or not income support schemes can bring an end to poverty, and that is what is the context of this particular article also. Some important issues of what have been given and analysis is what has been given. So this article is very important. So coming to the first issue is that of the history of poverty eradication in India. So some background is what has been given in this particular article. Here it has been analyzed in this article that poverty eradication as an idea to independent India was something that vocally came in elections primarily in the year 1960. This was the Garibi Hatao Andolan, which started under the leadership of Indira Gandhi at that point of time. So if we take this as the particular timeline and we start poverty eradication as a major issue in India since 1960, so it has already been approximately more than 50 years. It has been 60 years for that matter. So the editorial is saying that it has been more than 50 years for this particular agenda in politics, and still India is discussing on the same issue again and again of poverty eradication. What is the lapse that even today poverty eradication has not happened in India? So the answer here is a flawed public policy. Now this is what the editorial is discussing is the main problem vis-a-vis poverty eradication. The policy of the government is to introduce schemes which are not addressing the root cause but rather are only palliative, or for that matter only symptomatic in nature. So this is the major issue. So what is the root cause of poverty? So the root cause of poverty according to the editorial is something called capability deprivation. Such kind of terms, please make a note of them. These are key words. Now, capability deprivation simply means that the individual is unable to earn a sufficient income through work or through entrepreneurship, and this is primarily happening because the individual is not capable to earn that kind of income. And why the individual is not capable is because some basic inputs in that individual have not been provided by the public policy, or for that matter by the government. For instance, health is not adequate, education is not adequate, skill is not adequate. So these are what are capabilities that are generated. Even the physical infrastructure in a country is what is constituted under the capability which ensures an individual to earn enough income for his or her sustenance. Now because this capability is what is lapsed in our country, poverty is something that is still not eradicated, and that is what is the root cause which needs to be addressed rather than simple palliative schemes which the government keeps on coming up with. Next is the concept of income poverty. Now, income poverty is simply a manifestation of this capability deprivation. If a person is not capable of generating income, then definitely income will be less, and that is what is going to result in income poverty. So this is only a manifestation and not the root cause, but the government is trying to cure this because there is an income poverty. Government is providing with income support. So that is one analysis which has been given. Next analysis is with regards to the schemes which are now very much in use. This is the already introduced Pradhan Mantri Kisan Nidhi Yojana, where 6,000 rupees are to be given annually to farmers at 3 installments of 2,000 each. Next you should know is another scheme which is the Nyuntam Aay Yojana, which is the Nyay. This is a proposed scheme in the Congress manifesto which has claimed that it is going to give 6,000 rupees to poor families per month. Approximately 20% of the poor households are going to be covered under this scheme, as has been mentioned in the Congress manifesto. So these are the income support schemes because of which this particular topic is what becomes important. Next is the issue of the fiscal space. Now the editorial here is discussing that basically these kind of schemes are pushing the boundaries of the fiscal space, which is not aligned for such kind of income support schemes. What is happening at present in India is that, for instance, in the Nyay scheme, it is being estimated that this is what is going to cost approximately 13% of the expenditure in the budget. Now this is something that is already double the amount of expenditure which the government is doing on health and education, which is approximately 6%. So more than that is the planning of spending under this particular scheme, which is Nyay. This is also more than the capital expenditure which the government is doing, which is always done to create capital investments, or for that matter infrastructure in a country. So if this is the high amount of budget that is going to be spent on this scheme, then this is what is going to result in something called opportunity cost, because then lesser amount of budget is what is going to be provided for the health, education and capital expenditure, and this is something that is going to be adverse for the country, because whenever borrowing is what is done, fiscal space or fiscal deficit is largely when borrowing is what is done. Now if borrowing is greater in the country, if that borrowing is what is going into creating a capital asset, then that kind of borrowing is a good borrowing. But when borrowing is what is done for consumption purposes, it is negative borrowing, and it is something that is always considered as an unhealthy practice, and this, the editorial is saying, is what is being envisaged under these income support schemes. Next, something that has been discussed, which is very, very important, is a comparison between universal basic income versus the universal basic services. And this is something that even I would suggest you have to replicate in your answers. Now here the editorial is saying that the universal basic income concept is basically a European concept, and in European countries already this universal basic services are what are easily provided. For instance, education is given to all, health is given to all. These are government services which are already provided, and these countries are comparatively richer, and what happens is that if in these countries some amount of money or public money is what is diverted to be given as an income support, it is very much acceptable. But for a country like India, this is something that is not possible, because at present universal basic services are only not provided in India. What are these basic services? These are health, education, water, sanitation and housing. So the editorial is calling upon the government to first provide universal basic services rather than a universal basic income as a solution for poverty eradication, because only when universal basic services are what are going to be provided, then the root cause, which is capability deprivation, is what is going to be addressed. Next is an analysis vis-a-vis the comparison of states is what has been drawn. Now the editorial is discussing that there are if you make an analysis or comparison of the states in India, then it is seen that the southern as well as the western states are comparatively having lesser degree of poverty as compared to the northern and the eastern states and the central states. So why is this this difference that is there in these states? This is primarily because these southern and western states had a different model of poverty eradication, and that was the model of enhancing the capability of individuals as compared to the northeast and central states, where the model was that of giving doles to the citizens, or for that matter helping them or providing income support to the citizens. So from this particular model also it can be concluded that this analysis in the editorial of that of universal basic services is what is required for poverty eradication. A question is very much expected where you will be asked to analyze the difference or which model is particularly better, an income support model or for that matter such kind of a model which works upon universal basic services. So you should have points in the favor, and the pros and cons of both these models is what you should have well prepared for you. That is going to be important, and this topic is largely important for general studies paper 1. So that is the relevance. Coming to the next article, secrets and agents. Now the context here is with regards to the arrest of Julian Assange. Now for those of you who don't know, 7 years back there was a huge amount of expose that had taken place at that point, and this was something that was led by a platform known as the WikiLeaks. This is an anti-secrecy website, and this anti-secrecy website is what is headed by Julian Assange. For the past 7 years, Julian Assange was taking shelter in the Ecuador embassy in London, and now finally the shelter was what was withdrawn by the country Ecuador, and now the arrest is what has been made. Some points are what are important for us. The first is that of a question on the freedom of speech. Now his arrest is what is being seen by many as a threat to the freedom of speech, because this was his right to express what he had found out is what has been analyzed or what is being said in his favor, in the favor of Julian Assange. So his arrest is a threat to freedom of speech. Next is the issue of journalism and media. Now the question here is that WikiLeaks is basically a website. So can this website be simply considered as a media house? And Julian Assange, who is the head of this website, can he be considered as a journalist? That is one question. And this question becomes very much more pertinent today, because today social media is on a rise. If me and you, we find out something which requires some degree of expose that is needed, we also have the opportunity today that we can go and make that particular piece of information available on social media. So are you and me also journalists? And the protections that are going to be given to journalists and media houses, can these protections be claimed by a website? So that are some pertinent questions which have been asked, though definitely social media and its power is very high today, and some degree of protection is what is required to be given to people who are making exposes on social media also. Next is the issue is that next important issue is with regards to the impact that this is going to what this is going to happen on whistleblowers. Now what is going to happen here is that it is being discussed in the editorial that whistleblowers might get discouraged and they might get threatened to release any such kind of information. But here the editorial is discussing that for that matter you should also know that in India whistleblowing is something that is important. We also have a Whistleblowers Act, and in ethics paper questions on whistleblowing have often been asked, case studies on whistleblowing have been asked. Even if the whistleblowing is what is resulting in a threat to an individual, should the individual take the morally correct path of blowing the whistle are some important questions which need to be addressed. So this is one case which could lead to a threat on whistleblowing itself, because Julian Assange is often considered as a whistleblower. So these are some pertinent questions and issues which become important vis-a-vis the arrest of Julian Assange, and largely the question is important with regards to whistleblowing and its importance in ethics paper. So that is the relevance. Coming to the next article, a pathway to office with power. Now the context here is that 14th of April was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's birth anniversary, and as a result of which this particular editorial has been written. Now some issues are what are important in this particular editorial, which I have extracted, which have relevance for us. Other issues and other details are not what are important. So the first analysis is with regards to a hero worship based election. Now the editorial is discussing that it is the first time in India's history that a hero worship based election is taking place. Here the hero is the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who is being worshipped as a hero. The editorial is discussing that even in the era of Indira Gandhi, the idea or ideology of elections was basically of Garibi Hatao, and these kind of models were what were adopted rather than a blind hero worship at that point of time also. Some degree of comparison is what can be brought about with Jawaharlal Nehru, and that is something that is important, that even at that point of time there was a hero worship, and this is something that is akin to that model. So this is one thing that is important. Next important analysis is with regards to a separate electorate. Now here you should know that Dr. Ambedkar had made the demand for separate electorate well in 1940s, and it was Gandhiji. It was also something that first and foremost you should know that this concept of separate electorate was also acknowledged and approved by the Britishers, but it was Gandhiji who went on to a fast, who took upon himself a fast unto death, and it was after his fast that this idea of separate electorate was what was dropped. So this is something that has been analyzed here, that Dr. Ambedkar did not forgive Gandhiji for his negation of the concept of separate electorates for the Dalit, and that is something that would have been important for the empowerment and power and strength of the Dalit voters. Next is the concept of Dr. Ambedkar's electoral graph, which has been analyzed. Now here the editorial has given us several details which you can take a read if you are interested in, but largely the analysis is that Dr. Ambedkar was, despite the fact that he was such an intelligent man and he had such a contribution to social emancipation in India, but he never won elections. He had a negative track record vis-a-vis winning elections. He was brought into the parliament through the Rajya Sabha seats, and he often lost many elections, which clearly reflected that a leader as capable as Dr. Ambedkar also had difficulty in winning elections, which showed that how feeble or how weak was the Dalit voter. So that is what has been analyzed in today's concept or today's analysis also, that even in today's elections, the Dalit voters are not getting their due power, and also the Dalit leaders are not able to emerge very, very conveniently in the present electorate. So that is what has been analyzed. Next is the issue of party dependency. This is something that could be valid for all the other sections also, but here it has been analyzed vis-a-vis the Dalit section. Here it has been analyzed that any leader is very much dependent on the political parties. This is also in line with the anti-defection law, where the leaders are now not being able to represent their people very much effectively, and this is something that is going negatively for the Dalit voters. That is something that has been analyzed, that the Dalit voters actually are not finding their voice in the present system. And next, what has been analyzed is the issue of office versus power. So here the editorial analyzes that despite the fact that reservations are allowing offices to the politicians who are coming through reserved seats, but what is important is that with an office should also come adequate power, but this diversion of power is what is not happening, and as a result of which today the office is that without power, and that is also the title of this editorial, that there is a need to ensure a pathway where the office is what is leading to power for the Dalit leaders as well as for the Dalit electorate. So that is the entire analysis here. This is one small concept that could be extracted from this particular editorial. and this concept is something that we can replicate whenever we are discussing general studies paper 1 social issues. There, if you have an opportunity of discussing that why the emancipation of the Dalits is something that is not successfully happening. So there you can clearly use this particular example, that it is primarily because they are not finding adequate power or adequate voice in the elections, or the electorate is not very well represented. So that is what is the entire analysis here. Now that's all for today, and these are the only important articles. Before we end, please take a look at our batches. We are starting with our IAS regular batch from the 15th of April, and we shall be continuing admissions for some more time. So those of you who are interested, do get in touch with us. Also, we are starting with an IAS prelims revision batch from the 20th of April. So these are our contact details. All interested candidates, please do get in touch with us. And that's all for today's discussion. I thank you all for watching the video.